I'd like to introduce the final speaker for, excuse me, for this evening, Sandra, Yuen, MacKay. Sandra's a visual artist. If you haven't seen any of her work, you can look on the internet, you can Google her, and she's got some amazing visual art that just is evocative and beautiful and creative and expressive. She's also a speaker on mental health issues and is the author of My Schizophrenic Life, The Road to Recovery from Mental Illness. As a way of recognizing her many contributions, Sandra has received the Coast Mental Health's Courage to Come Back Award, and she's also received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for overcoming adversity and for giving back to the community. She's going to do that again this evening. Sandra, please join me on the stage.
Thank you very much. Brian, I really enjoyed your very evocative talk, and thank you, Natasha, for your wise words. Okay, so as I'm an artist, I decided I'd put a bit of artwork into my presentation, so it sort of parallels my journey and my story. So this painting is called The Silent Woman. So she has no mouth, so she's unable to articulate what's happening for her. She's suffering in silence. So in 1979, I was 14 years old, a very shy student at Vancouver High School, and I started to see things. Like I thought I saw students at school at the window of my house, and I kind of ignored them. I'd heard voices outside. I thought they were students, and I thought, oh, they're spying on me, they'll go away. But then I started to hear voices in the car, on the bus, through the PA system at school, at my friend's house. I thought I was being followed downtown. I thought people were taking pictures of me in the shower, stopped bathing. Kind of asked my father, what's going on? Is there people outside the house listening to us? Or, oh, there's nobody out there. I don't know what you're talking about. So I didn't make much progress there. The voices turned on me. Soon I became very paranoid and confused. So this is two irises. So irises are the flower of healing. So it's sort of the yin yang. So on the left is the purple flower, is more the darker side in my existence, and the yellow being hope or positives in my life. So I did some bizarre things, and I destroyed some properties. So my parents decided we need to check Sandra into emergency and find out what's going on for her. We had no history of schizophrenia in my family. I myself didn't really know what an auditory hallucination was, never mind paranoid schizophrenia, but that was my diagnosis. So that meant I'd had hallucinations for about 9 months. I was delusional, thinking a plot was against me between the students and my parents, who I totally distrusted. I withdrew from my friends and my family, really wasn't able to carry on a 2-minute conversation, and then I became had flat effects, so not really showing much emotion. Very hard to go back to high school and thinking that all the new students thought that I was this crazy person. They had seen me in the shower. I mean, still the delusions were very much real for me, and I felt really bottom of the barrel, personally weak that I couldn't figure this out. I was just too stupid to figure it out. I was never gonna make it in life. I had a life sentence, etc., etc., etc. So that was sort of being a lot of peer pressure, feeling that I was really the odd person in that room. Oh, sorry. So I graduated my class, fortunately, and I decided I like fine arts. So I enrolled at Langara's Fine Arts program. This is a portrait of Tanya. She's looking into the window of knowledge. So after that, I also went to UBC and got an art history degree, but really it was very difficult. I mean, when you're having symptoms in a lecture hall, it's dark, you're starting to fall asleep, you forget to bring note paper, your instructor kind of looks like a comedic actor on television. There's rock musicians in your English class. People are taking advantage of your grades. It was just like an ongoing thing. So it was really a miracle that I actually graduated. So I worked for my father for a number of years. He was an architect, and I learned a lot about design and that sort of thing. This painting is called Out of Mind, so you can that's sort of self-explanatory. I was not always present at work. I missed a lot of work because I was sick, seeing a doctor, or medication issues. But I did worked there for quite a number of years. He was sort of good to me because he's my dad. My grandmother passed away, my grandfather passed away in 1997. My doctor switched me from trifluperazine to risperidol, became very manic, went off medication, and was rehospitalized in 1998 and diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. So a combination of schizophrenia, the delusions, and mood disorder. So I thought, I'm really worse off than I started. You know, what can I do now? I had to quit my job. What's my life gonna look like now? So these are sort of things that helped me. Everybody sort of has their own things that kind of help them along the way. They're not in any particular order, but you know, Ryan was talking about love, and I think love was really something that really helped me. I met a fellow when I was younger, and he helped me through university. We dated for a long time, and then he asked me to marry him in 1984. We've been married 21 years. He's not mentally ill, people ask me, but he really is my rock. So when I need a go-to person, I go to him, and that's really helped me a lot. So having insight, having education around mental illness, having those seeds of hope planted in me, having stable housing, food, clothing to help me be in a state of mind where I could recover, support from other people, family, friends, mental health professionals, medication, exercise, because I was on olanzapine and I had to kind of work on that. Art and writing being like therapy tools, and reality checks. So, you know, if something's going on for me, I ask my husband, hey, is this real that your brother said this negative thing about me? He'll kind of say, well, you know, he'll think about it and says, well, that doesn't really sound like he would say something like that, Sandra. I mean, I think maybe it's you're having a bad day, you know, maybe it's part of your illness, maybe you need to move on. So the Wellness Recovery Action Plan helped me, so having a wellness toolbox, so things that kind of keep me well, be it a daily maintenance plan or avoiding triggers. Like if I'm in a paranoid state, don't go see Shutter Island. Do not go see one of the things. You know, just like parameters you can put yourself in, so you don't put yourself in that position exactly. Also having a crisis plan. So if I'm incapacitated, I'm in hospital, there's people in place that can take care of my affairs outside of that hospital. MCT is a pared down version of of cognitive behavioral therapy. So using logic and reason to kind of filter ideas. So not jumping to assumptions, not jumping to wrong conclusions. And for example, like if I'm walking down the street and as someone looks at me, swears and turns and walks away, if I'm in a paranoid state, I probably think he's either out to get me or he's part of this like lifelong conspiracy, etc., etc. But if I'm in a different state of mind, maybe he's on a cell phone, maybe he's talking to himself, maybe he got splashed by a car driving by. So that's just a really basic illustration, but it just shows you that, you know, the world doesn't revolve around my egocentric fantasies or delusions of paranoia, so that sort of thing. Sorry, paper. So one thing that really helped me was mindfulness, and so it's around breathing exercises. So you breathe and you feel yourself in the moment, you feel how you feel physically, emotionally, psychologically, mentally, and you kind of just exist in that time and sort of empty your mind of everything. So number one, I don't do the breathing exercises. Okay, so I read the parts of the book. Okay, so I'm gonna skip that whole, you know, formal part of it. Go right to the meat of the thing. Okay, so breathing is about pausing, right? So pausing before I act, or how I respond to a thought or emotion. So if I'm aware of my thoughts, like, you know, things that are a little bit out there, I can sort of recognize them, that they're maybe not truths, that not everything I think is a truth. To create that same thing around emotions, of having emotions built on these false ideas, you know, kind of think about, build some emotional distance and say, maybe that's not really true. Maybe I guess gotta step back, count to 10, breathe a little bit and move on. So letting those really negative emotions kind of pass through me, or thoughts, I'm in kind of my head and I'm really having this huge fantasy, just kind of let it go through. So I have a problem with anger. So sometimes I want my own way. Okay, so I'm like a little kid, you take your toy away, and I'm mad, I'm selfish, I don't want that, or I do want this because I deserve it, right? So the thing is, I would beat my head against a wall about the same issues over and over again, be it a living condition or whatever it is. So the questions I ask, do I desire change, or I just like complaining about it? Do I want to tolerate the problem, change my behavior to the problem, or figure out a solution? So those types of things. And around self-stigma, really about being less critical and judgmental of myself and others, and building compassion and acceptance into how I view myself and the world around me. So really, like a lot of my problem was, I wanted to fight back, okay? Self-stigma, I'm gonna fight back, I'm gonna prove myself. So I became this sort of achiever type person. So really, I would be living in chronic anxiety. I would be like, I had to do this today. I have to get art show by such and such a date. I have to be, get this degree, get this job. And it was just really turning into a roller coaster of, stress, added stress and failure, because I wasn't living up to what I wanted to be. So really stopping that whole cycle and stepping back and being in that moment. And also when I had that self-pity, when I really felt, really this isn't working for me right now, I kind of look around and say, it really isn't that bad. I've got a place to live. I've got a husband who loves me. I can do painting a little bit. I can write a book, so maybe it's not that bad. Oh, sorry. Okay. So what makes a difference to decrease stigma? So I think Natasha sort of covered a lot of this. So I'm really happy because you're here hearing, took your time out this evening to hear personal stories. So that's really important to build public awareness, right? Because if we're motivated, maybe we can make the government work in marvelous ways. If we see the person, as Natasha said, not as that diagnosis, as a multiple faceted person, that we're people, right? We're people first. And if people look at me and they say, well, I remember when you were a kid and you did these funny things, or you were a good student or whatever, and they're not basing me on my current psychotic state or if I'm in a bad space, right? So there's this side of Sandra, the monster, but this side of Sandra who's sort of creative and tells funny jokes on Facebook. Okay, so, and also having compassion, right? So like compassion being not only for people with mental illness, but we put like an umbrella over it, right? Like I think the others said, like, if we consider prejudice against other things like race, education level, economic status, if someone's homeless, if someone's transgender, or if they have a sexual orientation that may not be one of your own, I think, it's important to be compassionate to all people. If you have a personal connection, someone who has gone through a real trial with mental illness that can actually bridge how you feel about it, and to see belief that a person can recover and contribute to the community is really, for me, that was bottom line, because people believed in me and they, kept me in school, they helped me out and gave me the tools and support so I could survive and become better. So, one of the takeaway I want to say is, so if you're in a situation and they're saying things about, per se, someone who's mentally ill who committed a violent act or something, just take a moment and say, well, maybe we'll take away this dialogue, the words that are coming out about the craziness, the nuts, the stupidity, and all that stuff, and just think, maybe that person had the right treatment, maybe this could have been prevented. I think you might have seen in the news today about Ryan Norris, and they talked in that article about if he had long-term, supported housing and that sort of thing, he may have not died. Okay. Yeah. This is my book, this is my plug. So it's also available on Kindle, or you can just get it at the Vancouver Public Library. It's just down the road. I talk about my journey in my book if you're interested. Okay. So this is one of my later works. So this is called Hibiscus, and it's 12 feet long, and it hangs at Willow Pavilion at Vancouver General Hospital. So that's one of the ways I like to give back. So I think, part of my journey is finding purpose in what I do, and that really builds my confidence and makes me feel whole. And the fact that I can aid other people by giving back through public speaking or just giving people support. People email me, they say my daughter has having this issue or whatever, and if I can be there and give them some hope, I think that's really important, to have a personal connection and really help other people. This is my last quote here. So this painting is called Mindbender. Recovery means not necessarily being cured, as there is no cure for schizophrenia, but having hope, social inclusion, dignity, and finding purpose and happiness in life. I think we all want happiness in life. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go home and look you up on Facebook. Maybe you'll be my friend. I feel very humbled, actually, to share the stage with all three of you. So now I'm going to invite all three of you to come up to this. We're going to shift now from the podium to the living room. I've always wanted to kind of have an Oprah experience. And one of my life fantasies is about to come true. Into us online through the RSVP form. So I'm going to kick it off. I'm a 27-year-old woman and I've recently been diagnosed with bipolar disorder 2. I'm struggling with severe depression, but mostly shame about my illness to the point where I won't share what's going on with my family and friends, or I stall my doctor's appointments because I haven't fully accepted my diagnosis. How can I overcome the shame?
So I hear a lot from people who are in that situation, and many situations like that. And I think what I was talking about earlier, that we're all part of a really big community, is something that that particular person is sort of missing. She's missing that piece that says that it's not just me. I'm not the only person with bipolar 2, and in fact, I'm not the only person who puts off doctor's appointments. I'm not the only person who doesn't want to talk to my family about it. She's in good company. So in my opinion, something she could do is seek out some sort of support group for people so that she can understand that all those people in the room are just like her and going through exactly what she's going through. And so that is one way to kill that shame, because you realize, oh gosh, I'm in a room full of people with bipolar disorder and they all seem really normal.
Yeah, is it working? Okay. I saw a private psychiatrist for a long time, and I really felt isolated. There was nobody that I knew that had an illness like me. I thought I was the only one having these symptoms. But once I joined a mental health team, I met other people like myself, and also at the art studios, where it's a program for people with mental illness and addictions who can go and create art and get lessons for free. And there I met some artists in the community who also had a diagnosis. So really, it was all about connecting with other peers, or even finding a peer support worker, or just finding activities in the community where you're meeting other people. Yeah, it's important to bring yourself out of isolation and realize you're not alone.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's important to find community, and I know even for myself, being a photographer and a musician, networking in those circles alone, I've been able to connect with a lot of people who are, living with mental illness or mental health challenges. So I think, the key thing is just to not isolate and find some kind of community somewhere.
Okay. The questions that are coming are absolutely amazing, so I really want to encourage you to keep sending down the questions. And what I'm going to do is generally choose some of the questions that are for all three of you. There are some questions coming that are very specific to one of you, but all three of our speakers will be staying afterwards just to informally chat. So I'm going to just default a little bit to those general questions. So sometimes we hear people say that we shouldn't be using diagnostic terms, that there's a limitation to using the diagnostic psychiatric terms. And someone's asking, was it helpful to you to receive a diagnosis? And if so, how?
For me, it was helpful in some ways because they were able to kind of pinpoint where things were at for me and get me the appropriate treatment. I had bipolar type 2, and they had tried me on lithium and valproic acid, which weren't quite right for me, and they found through specifying which type I had, I was able to get on medication that was correct for me. That has continued to work when I do stay on it. But I don't have it. Sorry?
Which one?
Lamotrigine. So that's worked for me. And with complex trauma, that's also like kind of differentiating between post-traumatic stress disorder and somebody living with complex trauma. The therapies are a little bit different, and it just kind of helped me figure out how I needed to navigate my own recovery.
Yeah, for me, I think it was more of a tool that the doctors knew what to prescribe me, because once you had the diagnosis, you could sort of figure out what medication would work for that person. But having schizoaffective, it's a bit of everything, right? I mean, you have delusions, you have, bipolar, it's a little bit of everything. So really, I mean, for me, it helped me to maybe be able to research my illness to find out exactly what the specifics were. But I think everybody's case is so individual. So some people need different types of medications and different types of their lives, different cocktails to make them well. So I think it's really, they try to put those labels on there, but it's important to know the person's an individual with personal strengths, and you need to work with them in their individual way.
Yeah, so I'm a super logical person. And so something about that is, if I have a problem, I want to name it. I don't really want this vague haze around me. So for me, having an actual illness with an actual name that I could actually research, like you just said, was really important for me. And I actually think is a turning point for so many people, because so many people don't understand all of the parts of themselves that are actually related to that illness. For example, if you're only focused on maybe auditory hallucinations and you don't realize paranoia might also be part of what you're experiencing, how the heck are you ever going to address that particular problem? So, what happens to people with bipolar, some of them say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I had this pattern and that pattern and that pattern in my life until I finally got a diagnosis and someone explained to me that those patterns are part of the disorder. So I think names are critical, because without them, you don't have any of those aha moments.
Okay, sorry, I'm so sorry. Around the theme of the workplace and employers. And a couple of people have asked questions along the lines of, is it a good idea to disclose a mental health issue with an employer? And have you experienced discrimination in the workplace?
Yeah, so I was working retail, and I was assistant manager, and I told my boss one day, I need to quit. And she says, why? I said, well, I'm having reoccurring symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. So she didn't know I had an illness at all, right? So she just switched. She was like, well, that sounds pretty crazy. She says, I didn't, nobody's going to make up they have a mental illness to get out of a job. You must be really serious, Sandra. And I said, well, do you want me to stay on another 2-3 weeks so you can find a replacement? No, we don't really want you around the customers. Goodbye. But now that I'm kind of out there with my book, it's sort of out there. So it's like anybody that is going to harm me is going to know. So that's about it, yeah.
That's, I think, one of the benefits of working where I work is when I went in for my interview, they sat down, and I have done a little bit of schooling post-secondary, but they wanted to hear about my life experience. So as soon as I said, well, I'm a survivor and I have bipolar disorder, complex trauma, I've got an addictions history, they were like, you're who we're looking for. Have you ever been homeless? And I'm like, yeah, 3 times. And they were like, okay, yeah, we'd love to have you on.
I'm your guy.
So I think it's important to do your research and really, if you want to give back, then I think it's important to work for organizations that will allow you to do that in every which way. With this organization, it hasn't been a problem, and most of the work that I've done over the last 10 years has been within the communities that I'm a part of as well. So I've had a lot of fortune there.
So I have a really different thought on that. So I've worked in sort of corporate America, if you will, and my advice to people who work in that particular environment is no, absolutely not. Do not tell anyone. And it's not because I care, I don't care. It's because the people around you are going to do a flip. Some of them are going to do that to you. And no matter how intelligent you think those people are, no matter how insightful, no matter how brilliant, some of them are going to do it, and it's going to affect your career path. It's what we used to call, I used to work for a very large software company in Seattle. You might have heard of them. It's what we called a career-limiting move. You don't do it. That, again, it's just my opinion, but I can tell you that one of the individuals I worked with at this software company, who had been with the company for more than 20 years, also had bipolar disorder, and he told his manager, because he had certain needs around this particular illness. And he had been with the company for more than 20 years. And he later told me that the second he told his manager, his career there was over. And he told me, in no uncertain terms, you never, ever, ever tell anyone. Because honestly, if someone like him, who has all of the track record imaginable, can get put on a career track to nothing, it can happen to anybody. So that's just my view.
A couple of people have asked questions about your experiences with healthcare, with the healthcare system, with healthcare providers. So I'm wondering if any or all of you could just share your thoughts. What you think healthcare providers need to know when providing care for people with mental illness. And I guess I think what they're meaning here is people who are not in the mental health system, right? But other other healthcare providers than those in the mental health system. And also, what are the barriers that you've seen or experienced, and how do you think? What suggestions would you have on how those barriers could be overcome?
Well, I can speak to some barriers that I've experienced. Somebody who not just has mental health issues, but somebody who is trans. I think some of the biggest barriers I faced are people asking, whether starting testosterone was something that flared up bipolar disorder, or are you transitioning because of what happened to you as a child? No, it would have been this way either way. But I think it's important to really, if you are in a healthcare field, to do, if you're asking these questions, it's important, and they're good questions, to really research, different ways that people can be more, aware of some of the issues that people face. For me, this last year I got diagnosed with osteoarthritis in my knees and my ankles. And for a long time I was having chronic pain and I couldn't figure out why. And I had doctors tell me, well, it's probably just psychosomatic. It's because you went through blah 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 blah. And not always. Sometimes there are genuine, and a lot of times there are genuine old injuries, or there's actually something going on. It's not always in your head, So it's important to remember that just because somebody has something going on, like a mental illness or addiction, doesn't mean that there isn't something else going on too. And everybody should be treated with the same level of care. It's a no-brainer. When doctors become doctors, when nurses become nurses, you take those oaths and you sign your licensing, and it's to be equal with everybody and treat everybody the same. So that's but I've also experienced a lot of discrimination in the healthcare field as well for various issues.
So when I started treatment, it was the medical model, right? So you see a psychiatrist, you treat it with medication. You might talk a bit, but you don't really do a lot of problem solving. You just kind of express yourself, then you go home. So then, gradually through my treatment, I guess the philosophy kind of changed as far as psychiatry went. So they see you for 5 or 10 minutes to do your med review, but you mainly work with a case manager. So my case manager, my last one, she was very, proactive and very strength-based oriented care. So go with it, Sandra. Oh, you had a blip, but you'll be fine tomorrow. Just keep moving along. And then I was sort of feeling, but you're not catching all the stuff I'm telling you. I'm still having symptoms. But you kind of say, well, you were fine when you came in. You had your objective about it. You had kind of gotten over it. Just move along. And I'm like, well, no. I think I really got to figure this out because it's an ongoing constant thing that keeps coming up, right? This particular delusion or whatever it is. So now they decided, well, we need to graduate you from your team because you haven't been hospitalized since '98. You can move out, find your own care, even if you have to pay for it. And, we need more room for people that are coming out of hospital or other places where they need more care than you need, right? So, so I'm too well to get mental health care from a team, but I'm not well enough to get a regular job. Okay, so I'm sort of in this la-la land, and I really kind of felt abandoned. I mean, I understand the strategy, like recovery, you're better, reframe it, just look for the positive, but really, there's some issues that I still have from when I was 15, and they keep cropping up, and I think if I leave the team, I'm afraid of losing continuity of care and things like that. So that's one drawback I've had recently.
So I just really want to echo something you said, which is that once a doctor, often a GP, so like a non-psychiatrist, finds out you have a mental illness, suddenly every single thing that's wrong with you is because of your mental illness. It's really the most astonishing thing. What do you mean you're having stomach pain? Sounds like bipolar. It seemingly doesn't matter what you tell them. They just think it's your mental illness, or you're making it up, or you're drug seeking. Those are the things that instantly seem to go into their mind. So if there were one thing I could say to a practitioner out there, it would be, just treat us like everybody else. Yes, mental illness is part of the picture, no doubt about that. And mental illness does have physical realities and manifestations, but so does every other disease in the world. We deserve the same level of care.
Thank you. A couple of questions around meds. So people are just asking what your experiences and challenges have been around medications and dosages, how you've handled side effects, how you've seen the ebb and flow of your medications over time, and how you've sort of found the best spot to be, if I can put it that way.
Well, I began on the older antipsychotics. So you would get the shakes, you're jerking your leg like this, you're drooling, you are sedated, everything's a fog, your head's totally in it's like an encasement, and it's like you're trying to go through life, but everything's harder, and you've got all this restlessness in your back, you got, just tremors and all types of things, really, really a lot of side effects. So you need a side effect pill for the side effects, and the side effect pill gives you side effects. Mm-hmm. So then, we put on the risperidone, as I said, I became very manic because it wasn't a sedative, as sedating, as tricloperazine. So then I'm on a drug that's very freeing, and then I got really sick, right? Because I went off it, and et cetera, et cetera. But now I'm on olanzapine. So when I started olanzapine, which can, a person can put on 30, 40 pounds with olanzapine. They can get diabetes, they can get high cholesterol, all those things. So I had to go to the gym 3 times a week. I was swimming 3 kilometers a week. I was working out. Thankfully, when I started, I was a low weight. So when I started to put on weight, but I went up to about a size 12 from a size 6 or 8. And then I kind of went off that because I was actually eating more food to exercise. So not really monitored well. Then after that, put on more weight. Then I started to argue with my doctor. I said, I don't like the long-term side effects of this medication. I don't want to get diabetes. My blood levels are getting worse and worse. What can I do? So, talking about smaller portions at dinner time. Even if you're hungry, you don't eat because olanzapine takes away that feeling of fullness. But also trying to reduce my medication. So being on enough that I can function, but not so much that it's affecting my creativity or my alertness and that sort of thing. So finding that kind of happy medium, and it changes, right, seasonally or whatever. So you're always adjusting the medication in some cases.
Yeah. I think I like what you said about trying to find that balance. It can be tricky, and also being someone who's creative, there's just that little bit of edge that I need in order to, that I find if I take too much medication that, it will dull me. Unfortunately, when I was 14, when I first went into the system, they threw me on 3 different benzodiazepines at once. And that's, and then they tried to get me off those and threw me on an antipsychotic. They put me on Haldol, which is not a great drug to begin with. Never mind, a kid taking it, but I've been on a number of different drugs over the years, but what seems to be the best balance for me at this point is lamotrigine, and I find my therapeutic dose to be around 125 at this point. And then beta blockers for anxiety, which I took 2 propranolol an hour and a half before coming here, and only my palms are sweaty.
So are mine.
So it's the whole Oprah gig, right? Yeah, so for me, that's what works. I don't sleep great, but sleeping medication isn't really a thing I can take, because the only ones I can tolerate are ones I am addicted to. So melatonin comes into play sometimes, but I just let it be and eventually crash every so often and sleep for 12 hours. But it's,
It works.
yeah, so I just find it works.
I've been on virtually every medication, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. It's in the 40s or 50s probably. So I've also had virtually every side effect. I'm very sensitive to medication, which is one of the reasons doctors, don't like me. They don't. I will take a medication, and then I'll get a whole raft of issues, and then the medication, we're not able to get the medication up to a suitable dose. That's typical of me. So what has ended up working for me is very small doses of a whack of medications. I'm not recommending this as a tactic for people in general. I'm not suggesting a whack of anything for anyone, but that what has worked for me. And so it's kind of like you're saying, you take a dose that you can handle, but that isn't so high that it gives you so many side effects that you can't tolerate it. And the thing that I would say about side effects of medication is it's one of the things that doctors tend not to listen to you about. You go to your doctor and you say, "Doctor, I'm having this side effect. I can't sleep," let's say. And the doctor's like, "Yeah, it doesn't sound that bad, whatever." And then you go to the doctor and say, "Well, now I can't sleep and I can't ever feel full when I eat." And the doctor's like, "Yeah, you're stable, whatever, it's good enough." And that happens constantly in my experience, where doctors just won't listen to you when you bring up a side effect. They, if you're not in a hospital, clearly you're fine. And so the thing that I would say about that is, to anyone who's experiencing, really deleterious side effects that are really affecting their ability to live their lives, it's really important that they articulate that to their doctor in a way that's very clear and says, I cannot tolerate this any longer. You must change it. Because it seems to me that's the only thing that you listen to.
Okay, we have one more question. Actually, before that, though, I just want to say, a few of you have written notes just thanking each of you, and with notes of grace and thanks and expressions of remarkable courage all 3 of you have. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank the people who've sent those notes up.